Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope everybody is, doing reasonably well given all the crazy things happening in the world. I know life is complicated, so we really appreciate your spending a few minutes with us here today. Now let's get started. I'm Isaac Brown with Landmark Ventures. I'll be moderating our debate today. The main panel is going to be about 15 minutes long, and then we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A. Throughout the course of it, you can submit questions through the Q&A function. If we don't get to your question during the panel, feel free to email it to me afterwards and I can share it with the panelists. Today, we're going to have a dynamic debate about an incredibly important topic. It's an issue that's having a major impact on human resources and industrial operations around the world. It's this notion of a shifting workforce, and it creates unique challenges for the world's industrial enterprises. Now, in a moment, we'll get around to defining the concept and exploring, the problem and some potential solutions. But let's start with a couple of quick intros from our panelists. Mike, you want to go first? Could you just give us a quick intro on yourself?
Yeah, good morning. This is I'm with Through Company. I was the operational technology manager for a film manufacturing and materials division. I've been with the company for 34 years, all in operations or process development.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Brian, you want to do a quick intro and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, I'm Brian Sallee. I'm a co-founder and head of sales at Dozuki. We'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the call about what Dozuki does, but looking forward to getting into this this conversation with Mike and Isaac today.
Great. Okay, thanks, guys. So let's start with the big picture question here. What exactly does a shifting workforce mean? How does this create issues for big industrial companies, and what are they doing about it? Who wants to jump on that one?
Well, I'll start with that one. We've talked about the aging workforce versus the shifting workforce, and obviously everybody's aware of the baby boomer generation. The last 5 years, we've seen more retirements. The next 5 years is going to be extremely challenging because we're actually going to hit that bubble. More people hitting 65, retirement age, leaving the workforce. But in my experience, people are getting, younger people are getting more education. They're more willing to move around. They want a constant challenge. People are just not settling into jobs for, 5 to 10 years. It's more like 18 months to 2 years. And they also, I think, expect a challenge and development opportunities to learn more faster. So when I think of the term shifting workforce, it's like everybody's moving. Everybody's either moving out or moving up and moving on. And it does create some challenges.
Okay. And then, what are companies like 3M doing to try and to cope with some of these issues?
Yeah, we've been digging into this for a number of years, and I think we started with just better onboarding, orientation, development plans, really for everybody in the organization. And what we're finding is maybe that's not even enough. People want to come up to speed very quickly, be very competent, so we've spent some time researching adult learning methods. How to best communicate information, reinforce information, get people really highly skilled very quickly, challenging them to learn on their own as well. We're not a training and development company. We're not a university, so this is not our first nature. Our thing is innovation and making stuff. So we're having to kind of learn how to be educators, and it's a real interesting challenge. I think we're making some headway. But it really affects all levels of the organization. And I think what we found is, an entry-level staff position, one job change might result in some backfilling. So that's really 2 job changes. But in operations, the shop floor, one posting for a new position or one change might turn into 5 to 7 job changes. And so, we've looked at our numbers and said we might have to retrain and reskill and onboard and orient 25,000 people this year. So the numbers are just staggering, how to do that effectively.
Yeah, and Mike, that's the point, we've had some conversations about this before, and that's the point that's really interesting to me is all these job changes, that happen downstream when you have someone shift roles or somebody retires what is actually happening in the plants because of that. I know you've had some thoughts on this, but you mind sharing kind of what you're actually seeing in the plants as a result of, you know, all of these job changes and some of your most experienced people leaving the company?
Yeah, like I said, it's been kind of a battle for the last 5 years, and the next 5 years is not going to get any easier. And you know, my focus is, first thing I'm concerned about is people's safety and protecting the customer. You know, we just can't make mistakes. People get hurt. We you know, release bad product. The rate of change is so fast that, you know, that's priority one. But you know, just being confident and following a standard in the best known way, it's become more and more of an issue. I think it was about 3 years ago that our plants came to us and said, you know, they're adding shifts, they're turning over people. We really need a better solution than 3-ring binders and, you know, a safety video. And what we're also finding is people have a lot of knowledge tucked away, you know, in their toolkit, you know, on their personal hard drives, in notebooks, you know, even little scribblings on little notes on the machines themselves. And that's just not sustainable. You can't control it, you can't standardize to it, you can't improve it. And so we're seeing more and more of that. And so we were really seeking a solution. You know, and Brian, I will say we stumbled upon Dozuki and started running a small pilot and immediately found that we were able to solve some of those problems. And we'll get more into, you know, how we did that. But, you know, traditional methods just were not working.
Yeah. And I did want to share, I wanted to share a quick story. I think that kind of highlights this problem of the shifting workforce that I think our attendees will all probably relate to is, we call it the night shift story. We hear this all the time from our customers, but typically the night shift, you know, you have your less experienced employees working on the night shift. The experienced folks, of course, they want the day shift. But what happens is, you know, oftentimes we'll see a line will go down in the middle of the night and you've got inexperienced employees working. And, you know, one of the common ones is, you know, the maintenance technician's been on the job for a month, doesn't have a lot of knowledge, has been through some basic training. He goes to fix the problem, can't troubleshoot the issue, can't fix it, and that line ends up being down for 8 hours. They end up having to call in an experienced maintenance technician to come fix the issue. He comes in, he fixes it in 45 minutes. So you've got 8 hours versus 45 minutes. And this is happening every day in factories, you know, all across the US. And so how do you help someone like that inexperienced employee who, you know, doesn't have all the knowledge of that experienced employee? How do you equip them in, like you said, confidence? You know, knowledge, you know, brings confidence, but you can't always have that experienced employee there to protect the inexperienced employees. So how do you equip them with, you know, tools and information so that they can do their job, even though they maybe haven't seen that issue before?
Yeah, Brian, that brings up a great point. I mean, in traditional methods, you know, having a standard operating procedure or a manual somewhere tucked away, that just isn't going to help that off-shift employee be effective. And you know, I think we've all experienced, you know, trying to fix our, you know, lawnmower or whatever. And what's the first thing we do now? We don't go to the instruction manual. We go to YouTube. And we find somebody that's fixing it and they're walking us through. I changed out a carburetor on a leaf blower in 11 minutes using an 8-minute video and a carburetor in my life. And so how do you, you know, go down that path to help that person on the off shift, you know, be most effective at learning, and maybe it's not even learning, maybe it's just remembering, maybe it's a process or a repair or a procedure that you just don't do very often. And you just need kind of a step-by-step reminder. And, you know, getting a 300-page manual is not going to help. It's going to take you the entire shift to read the manual.
Interesting. No, I think that's a great example. And I think that increasingly we're dealing with a YouTube generation of people working in factories and other industrial environments. So I want to just ask kind of a new question, and I know this is something the three of us have talked about a lot, but, you know, a lot of times a digital solution is selected by somebody at the top of the food chain, and then it's difficult to get buy-in across the organization and roll it out. You know, people might not see the value in it. People might feel threatened by it, you know, frankly. So what are some of the keys to for, selling digital technology is really up and down the org chart for maximum adoption. Mike, you've obviously had some success doing this. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, selling any solution, digital or not, any change requires some selling, and people want the cost justification, and it's easy, and I will address that. But when it comes to learning, training, there is this perception. I've read articles and countless research on learning styles and generational learning styles, and frankly, I don't buy it. It's not what I see. What I see is credible information. They really want to hear from the expert, and video, photography, diagrams seem to resonate with everybody, old and young. And then thirdly, the ability to kind of go through it step by step and repeat. So repetition works for everybody. In music, you play your scales over and over again. Everybody learns that way. You can't skip the repetition part. So when we looked at a digital solution, we were looking for all those elements. We want the expert knowledge, we want the video, the media, and we want the ability to repeat. So what we did in this case is we started with a very small pilot group, people that had a pain. They were adding people, the documentation horrible. It was hard to find. And so we built kind of a user base of maybe 10, 20, 30 people, and did a test case. And then we circled back to some of our leaders and said, here's what we're hearing on the shop floor. This is more effective. This is working. Oh yeah, in my back pocket, I do have the cost information. And yeah, eventually I'm gonna have to deal with IT, and they're of course gonna say no. And they're gonna be concerned about security and stability and validation. And then the quality people are gonna come in and say, well, it's not ISO certified. And so you gotta deal with them. But I'll tell you what, when you start having hundreds, and now we're up to thousands of users that are just screaming, saying, we love this digital solution. It's a new day. Thank you for bringing it to us. Then those barriers start breaking down. In my particular case, my job is to find new stuff and, network with leaders, and they're very trusting. So I think I've got a little bit of an edge there. I also have upper management sponsorship that is very bold. So with their support, we can move things a lot faster.
Mike, I did want to ask a follow-up question on that. Is, you mentioned, you've got these people in the factory who are asking for this. They're interested. They want this type of technology. They want to use tools like this because it helps them do their job. Oftentimes, though, what we've seen is that, executives and folks that maybe not in the factory every day don't quite understand the challenges of the operator. How did you kind of tell that story of, hey, this is what it's like in a factory for an operator? These are their challenges. How did you get that story to resonate with the executives? Yeah,
with some of our executives, in fact, my sponsor, he goes to the shop floor. He goes with me, and I'm like, just let's experience this together. You can listen and hear the feedback. It's hard to get the other people not part of my group to make factory visits, and so really then I just need to get some kind of testimonies. Showing how some problems have been solved. One example comes to mind is I challenged one of my smaller factories. I said, I think you can digitize all your training over the weekend. And this was on a Thursday afternoon. I said, I think it's that easy. It's really, there's not a lot of upfront work. I think you'll see benefits immediately. So that leadership team, 2 or 3 people got together and they converted about 100 documents over the weekend. And then they started adding photographs and video on Monday morning. By Tuesday, I was already getting operators using it and making suggestions for how to improve the work. So they had gone through the cycle once and they said, well, yeah, I know that's what the manual says, but I got a better idea. Can we try it this way? And by Tuesday afternoon, the documentation was up to date with the newest and best method. So I can show the time on those documents, when it was created and when it was improved. And I say that all happened in about 3 or 4 days. When was the last time you saw a complex procedure, stuffed away in some 3-ring binder, go through that cycle that fast? And I'll tell you, that's a powerful story. People all of a sudden perk up, and they stop asking about the cost and the complexity of the digital solution. They're like, hey, I want a piece of that. I want to improve my standards every day. And we're stagnant. We're not following, making mistakes, and in some cases, I've got a whole new crew coming on. We're adding an entire shift of 10 new people that need to be up to speed by the end of the week.
Yeah, and I know we're kind of talking about how how do you sell this throughout the organization, but I did want to shift back to, we were talking about the shifting industrial workforce, and we're talking about people who are leaving their jobs, whether they're retiring or moving into new roles. And they always take some knowledge with them that, it's really hard to capture that knowledge. As much as we want to grab that knowledge from them, we want to document it or whatever. That's really difficult to do, nearly impossible in some situations. And oftentimes that's the knowledge that, like I mentioned that story earlier, that takes that downtime from 8 hours to 45 minutes is, that experience. I've seen this before. And what you mentioned there, Mike, is, you've got operators that are commenting, making suggestions for how to improve the information. How has that driven continuous improvement for you guys? And what has that done for the operators for them to be able to share their expertise?
Yeah, Brian, I'm glad my mind digital solution is capturing improvement. Capturing the current state, but setting yourself up for improvement right away. The biggest loss you have is when somebody leaves and they take a lot of great ideas with them. And so, we've tried, knowledge management techniques and interviews and all these other methods for technical employees as well as operators. And it just doesn't work. But when you give them a step-by-step guide and say, let's go through this before you move on, you're going to capture those ideas. It's not just a random conversation. It's just not an open-ended thing. It's like, no, what do you think of step 2? What do you think of that video? Does that really help you do the work more accurately? I've had maintenance guys watch a first draft of a maintenance procedure, created by one of the lean people or one of the industrial engineers. And they'll stop me and they'll say, Michael, that's great. Thank you. You know what? I can make a better video. Can I borrow that camera? I'll be back in an hour. And they go and they actually improve the visualization of the work because they've done the work. They know the angles. They know, you got to hold the tool in your left hand. And that's another case study. One of us in action from a maintenance tech, and the plant manager was just stunned. They're like, I've never heard this out of my maintenance organization or even that individual before. And now they want to be on the improvement effort and take a real active role, which I think is just fantastic. There's so much pull, Brian. I think our surprise is how much pull and how much excitement there is when we've introduced this tool on the shop floor. We haven't seen anybody say, no, that's not going to work for me. No, thank you. It's like, no, how can I get involved? How can I help? Build the next set of documents.
And guys, I want to keep us on track here. So in a minute, we'll turn it over to Q&A. I can see there's already a few questions that have come in, but anybody in the audience who wants to submit one, this is a good time. I just want to end with a final thought. The last question we had here was share an example of a win rolling out a digital tech solution. And we've kind of been teasing at that for the last 5 minutes because, Michael, obviously you guys are rolling Dozuki out at scale, and obviously it's been very successful. I think one of the big impediments to getting buy-in for these kinds of solutions is ROI. So when you think about this kind of thing from an ROI perspective, what are you seeing in terms of actual quantifiable value, and really what are the goals for rolling something like this out? I know that you've done some work trying to quantify that. So let's wrap up with that, and then we'll turn to Q&A.
Yeah, it always comes up. I've seen studies done that solutions even does reduce your document creation time, by 50%, training time maybe reduced by 50 to 70%. And I'm like everybody else, show me, is it really that? And I guess I've experienced that. I've seen us, create a whole new set of documents, 50 to 70% faster. Our training, onboarding of a new employee especially, I think is really key, is at least cut in half, maybe more. And I can't quite put my finger on it. It's pretty new to us, but that is the trend I'm seeing. But lately, you guys have probably heard about the little coronavirus and the need for respirator masks and face shields, and that's one of our businesses, of course. So my team got involved in supporting that, even though it's not part of our division. And the request was simply, we need to ramp up volume, we need to ramp up new people, we can't make mistakes, we got to keep people safe and productive. And so we've been going nonstop. My entire team, in fact, has been deployed into the respirator mask factories, using the Dozuki tool, converting any document over and using it as a way of training and onboarding. And frankly, these sites that are pulling us in, they don't see any other way to hit the numbers and hit the speed. And so I think that's the best testimony right there. In a crisis situation, it works. It's absolutely going as fast as it can. And when your mind is always, well, why didn't we do all this, 2 years ago? Why did we have to wait for the crisis? But that's what we're observing right now, is that it is the tool of choice. It's the way we're going, and we're having extreme success. Productivity, output is definitely going up. People are not making mistakes. The operators I was just working with in one of our factories a couple of weeks ago, they'd been on the job less than a week. And frankly, because of this method, they felt pretty confident about their work, and they were eager some other tasks to, kind of add onto their job responsibility, because they saw the opportunity right there. Hey, I learned the first 10 tasks pretty fast. I think I can learn the next 10 things pretty fast too. So I'm ready, which was great. It was so fun talking to somebody that literally has been on the shop floor for less than 7 days. And they were that excited about, how they had been trained and the opportunities going forward.
Yeah. Okay, I wanna jump to a couple questions here. This one's from an anonymous attendee, and I think it's in line with what we're already talking about around ROI. And having worked with Dozuki for a while, I mean, we've seen similar things from other customers around reduction in training time. I know that one thing we've talked about at 3M specifically is reduction in changeover time, and there's a lot of value in those things. But before you'd been able to prove any value in using Dozuki or a similar kind of solution, how did you justify the budget to start rolling it out? How did you verify the need within 3M before you had quantifiable ROI from using it? I like this question.
Yeah, that's a very challenging way of phrasing the question. Well, it kind of goes back to what I said about running the trial. We started out with some and a very small license, just kind of in demo mode. And when we saw the excitement and the pull, we knew we were onto something. And then we kicked into the executive sponsorship, and let's run a larger pilot. We went pretty big in terms of number of users. I think we're at 1,000 users, and we'll be at 10 to 12,000 by the end of the year. We'll at least double that. So it was a very steep ramp up. But part of it goes back to those conversations I was with my factories, and you brought up changeover, and we were really struggling with changeover, making mistakes there, losing time, losing a lot of money, a lot of material cost. And so that's kind of where the justification came from. If we blow one changeover, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we could make that up very quickly with a successful changeover in one of our large operations. So that didn't hurt, having those opportunities right in front of us, and having those numbers staring us in the face.
Yeah. Interesting. And then another question here that's similar to this, and either you can answer this one, but then once you have rolled this out, how specifically do you benchmark the performance of the solution? How do you like logistically go through the process of showing that it has been valuable?
Mike, you want
Brian,
to?
do you have any example of that? Oh,
Yeah. I mean, I know, Mike, you've got good examples for 3M, and kind of what we've seen across our customer base is, once it is rolled out, a lot of our customers are focused on, reducing scrap waste, reducing rework. Those tend to be two of the main areas that they're trying to measure, and oftentimes they see the biggest reduction. Mike, you talked about reducing training time, reducing onboarding time. Those are two other ones that a lot of our customers are paying attention to. But oftentimes what we see is scrap waste and rework go down. Once you provide better training and you provide better support through a system like Dozuki to your operators. And that's the big one. I think a lot of, Mike, you've talked about this before, but like scrap waste and rework, it just becomes part of the model, and you build it into your model and you say, hey, that's just the way it is. And you don't actually try to fix that problem. We're always going to have, 10% quality issues or whatever it is, rather than trying to fix the problem, which typically is a training issue.
Yeah, and I would add to, those are all very true, and especially in the the changeover area for us, where we can generate a lot of scrap, expensive scrap, very quickly. But what I'm also hearing is, and the jury's still out on this, but I think long term, people like this high-tech solution. They feel like they're being provided with high-tech tools, modern tools. We care about the employees. I think long term we're going to see better, job satisfaction, employee surveys. Loyalty. There's an old saying that says, we'll hire Einstein, but we won't give him a calculator. Well, we'll hire, a new production operator, and we'll immediately give them this high-tech training solution and a voice to improve that right away from day one. And I think that's been resonating with people. And I think over the long term, it's really going to help, that loyalty, that retention of those employees.
Yeah, and Isaac, I know there's some other questions, but I saw one in here that I really was interested in addressing, which is, we hear this all the time. Well, what about AR and VR technologies? And I think the thing to think about with those technologies is, they have an application, but it's not this application. It's not going to help you solve this challenge of the shifting in workforce, right? Because it's all about capturing the experience and the expertise that these experienced folks have in their role. And as Mike mentioned earlier, you've got to give them a tool where they can share that information. An AR VR solution, that's not going to be the way that you solve for that challenge. And so that typically, that type of solution, it's got its place. I know it's really attractive and it's one of those cool technologies, but it's not meant to solve this challenge. It doesn't have the fundamental tools that you need to be able to solve it.
Yeah, I would say that AR, VR, I love it. It's cool technology. I'm kind of intrigued by it myself. But I would say maybe 10% of the applications, where things are extremely complex, very precise, maybe tasks that you don't do very often, having that, heads-up display and that sort of thing would be very, very helpful. But frankly, a lot of the stuff, it's more muscle memory, and it's just that building that foundation, and then really encouraging people to, challenge that every day. Is it working? Can I improve it? The repetition piece, and I'm not sure the AR, thing, really is going to help there. It's not going to help you develop the same level of muscle memory.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that's great, guys. I think that's a good story, and I know that we're coming up on time. So I want to thank you both so much for joining us today. We had, I think, hundreds of people who joined in the audience. So I want to thank you all for your time as well today. And I hope everyone has a great day. So thanks so much. If you have any additional questions or you'd like me to pose a question to Brian or Mike, feel free to shoot me an email. We appreciate all of you. Have a great day.